2, 1. Okay, let's see about, there we go. Problem number 15 from review set 2A. So it's the last problem, the hardest problem maybe. I think it probably is. We've got a nasty little function, x minus 4, the quantity x minus 4 squared plus 3. Noticing right away, remind yourself that's a quadratic. And it looks like it's actually in, what do you call that, HK format or vertex format. So we know the vertex is 4 and 3, which is why it's restricting the domain. Because remember, with parabolas, if we were going to be able to find the inverse of the function, we can only do half of the parabola. So that's why they restricted the domain right there, so that we have a function that we can actually find the inverse of. So in order to do 15b, we really have to do 15a first, because we need to find what's the inverse of that function. So let's do that one first. Find the inverse. If that's what h of x is, what's the inverse of that? So remember the steps. The first step is to write it as y equals x minus 4 squared plus 3. Then the second step is you swap the x's and y's. So I have x equals y minus 4 squared plus 3. And keeping in note that when you swapped it, because this in the original function, x had to be greater than or equal to, I guess you could say equal to, I think that's equal to 4. So now y has to be greater than. So we swapped it. So keep that in mind. So now we go ahead and we rework this equation so to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I'll just write that one, x minus 3. And then they kind of give us a little bit of a break because the y is all inside that quantity, so we can square root both sides. And then when we square root both sides, we'll have, I'll switch back to red, we'll have y minus 4 on this side, and we're going to have plus or minus, I guess, square root of x minus 3. And then get by y by itself, of y, I'm going to write this on the other side. I'm going to really bring the negative 4 over. It's positive 4 plus or minus the square root of x minus 3. And then this is the part that's a little bit, you might miss that little nuance. But since we said that y had to be greater than or equal to 4, then when you think about that, the 4 plus the square root of x minus 3 is okay. That's within the right range. But if you started at 4 and subtracted off minus square root of x minus 3, whatever that was, whatever, say it was 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is, that's going to be out of this range. It's not going to be allowed. So we can get rid of this minus. You guys see that? Because we can't allow it because of this restriction we made to the range from the original domain restriction. So really what we're going to end up with is y equals 4 plus, which helps, makes it a little bit more straightforward. So that's the inverse function. So that's what h of the inverse of x is equal to. So that's the first step. Now the second step, oh God, is to take that and we have to verify that when you compose the original function with the inverse function that you get of x, right? That's the same as if you were to do it in the opposite order. So remember, this is kind of like fog and Goff, that they both equal each other and they all just equal x. That's like that little test that if the function is actually invertible, then you should be able to do fog and Goff, and then they should always just equal x. So we just have to basically do each one of these as a separate little problem. So let's try that on the other side, or can I just erase this? Ooh. Let me just erase this part here. That's okay, right? I can erase that now. So if I erase this part, I want to make sure I have the final function, the inverse, this part here. So h composed with inverse of h. remember, let's remember how to do that. See, this problem's got like everything. So that's why basically it's like h of inverse of h. That's, yes. What does that equal? So we got a first, well, the inverse of h is this right here. It's this part here. So that's really saying h of 4 plus the square root of x minus 3. And then we take this and we stick it into that x, because that's the h function. So this whole quantity goes in there. So that's going to become parentheses. I'm going to put another parentheses for the x, put 4 plus the square root of x minus 3 minus 4 quantity squared plus 3. You see that? So this whole part here, this whole little guy, I'm going to put that in blue, this part here had to all fit inside that little x, that container. And now you can start to look inside here. Well, this 4 and this negative 4 are going to cross out. And so all you're going to have now is left is square root of x minus 3 quantity squared plus 3. And when you square that square root, that's going to become just x minus 3 plus 3. Oh, look what happened. The negative 3 and 3 crossed off. We got x. So it worked. When we did the one on the left, everything came down to just x. Now do the same thing on the right. Can I just fit it here? So now we flip it. We take the inverse function and we compose that with the regular function. So the regular function is what I'm going to underline in yellow, this whole thing. And we're going to stick that. So it's going to take the inverse of the quantity x minus 4 squared. And we're going to stick that into the inverse function, which of course is down here where I'm asterixing. That's that thing. So I'm going to take this whole thing and put it right into that x, that container. So let's see what happens. So you have 4 plus, I'm kind of curious about all this too, square root. Now instead of writing x, I'm going to write this whole thing. I'm going to put it in parentheses. So it's like really, it's double parentheses, I guess. X minus 4 squared plus 3. And then minus 3. This minus 3 is coming right from here. So this whole thing should be in parentheses. I should put like blue parentheses. That's that whole thing that got shoved into this x, and then the minus 3. And then look, once again, the minus 3 and the plus 3 cross off. They're all under that square root. And so now I have, erase that, go all the blue. So I have 4 plus the square root of x minus 4 squared. So the square root of that is going to be, that you're going to get rid of that, that's going to cross off that square. So I have 4 plus the quantity x minus 4. The 4's cross off, and we get x. So either way we did it, either direction, we did this side or we did this side, both sides got us x. That's a lot of algebra. Hopefully that looks good to you. Let me know if you need a little more help with that.